We complain about the cold today, but back then, people slept in sub-zero temperatures. We are used to thinking of winter through the prism of comfort: hot tea, a warm blanket, and a view of falling snow from a double-glazed window. Our complaints about the cold boil down to waiting for a taxi or a short run to the car. But what if winter were not a temporary inconvenience, but a 6-month test of survival? Let's travel back to the 13th century, to a simple peasant hut with no central heating, electricity, or even basic notions of comfort. This is not just a historical reference, but a thought experiment. Here we will compare our modern life with the reality of a medieval winter, where people slept in sub-zero temperatures inside their homes. This experiment will show how much our ideas about what is normal have changed and what invisible technologies ensure our daily well-being. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn why smoke inside the house was considered a blessing and what simple device was more important than a bed for survival on a winter night. The first thing a modern person would encounter upon entering a medieval hut in winter is not the cold, but the smell. The mixture of acrid smoke, rotten straw, and meager food being prepared created a dense, heavy atmosphere. This air was an integral part of everyday life, a background that no one noticed. Imagine that you have just left your modern apartment with air conditioning and air purifiers and stepped into this olfactory cacophony. Your lungs, accustomed to filtered air, would immediately rebel against this thick mixture of aromas. What was a normal part of life for a peasant family would be a real test of endurance for you within the first few minutes. The smell of smoke in the hut was multi-layered and complex, consisting of the aromas of various burning materials: wood, straw, dry manure, and peat. Added to this basic background were the smells of unwashed human bodies, dirty clothes that were rarely washed, and domestic animals that wintered together with people. If in your modern life the smell of unwashed laundry after a day already seems unacceptable, here clothes could go unwashed for months. This whole olfactory palette was intensified by poor ventilation, as windows and doors were kept tightly closed to conserve heat. You would instinctively reach for the window or turn on the extractor fan, but they simply did not exist. Your modern idea of fresh air as a basic need would clash with the harsh reality of survival, where warmth is more important than comfort. The structure of smells in the hut changed depending on the time of day and seasonal work. In the morning, the aromas of porridge being cooked and the hearth being lit prevailed, and in the afternoon, the smells of handicrafts and craftsmanship were added. Imagine your morning. You are used to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and clean sheets, but here you are greeted by smoke from the stove and the smell of yesterday's soup. In the evening, the air was filled with the aromas of dinner and smoke from the torches used for lighting. No soft glowing lamps, only smoky torches. Each season brought its own special notes. In spring, it smelled of fresh manure and meltwater. In summer, of herbs and flowers. In autumn, of ripening vegetables and preparations for winter. Your modern sense of smell, unaccustomed to natural rural smells, would perceive the spring scent of manure as something repulsive. But for a peasant, it was the smell of hope, a sign that the earth was ready to yield a new harvest. In our world, we fight against any smells, using air fresheners and exhaust fans, striving for sterility. For a medieval peasant, the smell of smoke meant warmth and protection, and the smell of food meant life itself, whatever it might be. It was olfactory evidence that the family was still holding on. If you found yourself in that hut, your modern perception of smells as a problem requiring immediate solution would clash with their functionality. Every 5 minutes, you would think about how to air out or freshen the air. Concepts that simply did not exist in the medieval mind. Your brain, accustomed to associating strong odors with dirt and danger, would constantly signal a threat where there was none. Modern civilization has created a culture of neutral, purified spaces where any intense smell is perceived as a violation of comfort and hygiene standards. Imagine the psychological stress of realizing that you cannot take a shower, put on clean clothes, or even brush your teeth. The familiar rituals of cleanliness that shape your sense of self-worth. In the Izba, these concepts were a luxury that even wealthy peasants could not afford. Medieval people lived in a world where smells carried important information. They were used to determine the quality of food, the health of family members, changes in the weather, and even the approach of danger. Your sense of smell, dulled by city life and an abundance of artificial fragrances, would be practically useless in this situation. What a peasant could determine by smell in seconds would remain a mystery to you, depriving you of an important tool for survival. The perception of smells as positive or negative was radically different from today's. What we consider unpleasant was familiar and even comfortable for medieval people. The smell of cow dung was associated with wealth and fertility, while the aroma of smoke was associated with the warmth of home and safety. Your modern psyche, where cleanliness equals safety and smell, is a signal of danger, would be turned upside down in an attempt to adapt to this new reality. This world of smells is radically different from our visual perception. Modern humans receive most of their information through sight, relying on visual images and light signals to orient themselves in space and assess their surroundings. Try to imagine yourself in the almost complete darkness of a hut, where the only light comes from a smoking hearth, and your smartphone with a flashlight has remained in the 21st century. The absence of bright artificial lighting made the sense of smell particularly important during the dark hours of the day, when smells became the main source of information about the environment. Your eyes, accustomed to the constant light of the city, would be virtually helpless in the pitch darkness of a medieval winter. You would stumble, get lost, and feel confused in a place where a peasant child felt at home, navigating by smells and sounds. The transition from the olfactory culture of the Middle Ages to the visual culture of the modern world represents a fundamental transformation of human perception of the world. Imagine the shock of realizing that your usual ways of interacting with the world, screens, buttons, light indicators, no longer work. You would have to relearn how to exist, relying on senses that modern life hardly develops. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think would be the most unbearable aspect of medieval life for you? The smells, the lack of hygiene, or something else? Write about it in the comments.
It smells like rosemary.
The walls of a 13th century peasant hut were made of wattle and daub, a mixture of clay and straw. This type of construction, known as a mazanka, did little to retain heat. Cracks and crevices were a constant feature, allowing the icy wind to penetrate. Imagine yourself in your modern apartment with double-glazed windows and insulated walls, and then mentally transport yourself to a dwelling where the walls let the cold in like a sieve. What you consider basic comfort, no drafts and a stable temperature, was an unattainable luxury. Your body, accustomed to a room temperature of 20-22 degrees, would be under constant stress from temperature fluctuations and the inability to shelter from the cold. Woven walls required constant care and repair. The clay plaster cracked in the frost, and the branches rotted from moisture. Every fall, the peasant was forced to reseal the cracks and renew the protective layer using straw, manure, and new clay. For modern people, accustomed to durable materials and professional repairs every few years, such a need for annual restoration of their homes would seem exhausting. The construction of even such a simple dwelling required the participation of the entire community. Men gathered branches and clay, women mixed mortar with straw, and children helped to plaster the walls. Your modern idea of privacy and individuality would clash with a reality where even a house was the result of collective effort. The concept of "my home is my castle" simply did not exist in a world where survival depended on mutual assistance from neighbors. The floor in such a dwelling was earthen, only occasionally sprinkled with fresh straw for minimal insulation. The cold from the frozen ground rose directly into the room, forcing people to keep their feet warm at all times. The concept of a smooth and clean floor simply did not exist. Imagine how your feet, accustomed to warm parquet or heated laminate flooring, would feel when they came into contact with ground frozen to a depth of 1 meter. Every step would remind you that there was no insulation, no barrier between you and the icy soil. Your house slippers and socks, which seemed sufficient for an apartment, would be completely useless against such piercing cold. The earthen floor was uneven, with pits and bumps formed by constant trampling and erosion by water. The straw that occasionally covered it quickly turned into wet dust mixed with mud and waste. Imagine your reaction to having to walk barefoot or in simple shoes on such a surface. Where you were used to seeing cleanliness and order, chaos reigned in the form of organic materials. Cleaning such a floor was practically impossible. The most that could be done was to rake the old straw with a pitchfork and cover it with new straw. Your modern understanding of hygiene, based on detergents, vacuum cleaners, and mops, would be completely inapplicable. Microbes and parasites, against which modern medicine wages a merciless war, felt completely at home here. The roof, covered with a thick layer of straw or reeds, was the only reliable protection from precipitation. However, it often leaked during thaws and required constant repair. In the next chapter, we will look inside this space and understand how the absence of personal boundaries affected the psychology of its inhabitants. A half-meter thick thatched roof did indeed provide good insulation, but only if it remained dry. During rain and thaws, moisture seeped through the straw, creating a steamy atmosphere in the hut, with water constantly dripping from the ceiling. Your idea of a house as a reliable shelter from the weather would be shattered by the reality of a dwelling that only partially protected against the elements. Repairing the roof was a dangerous and laborious task, requiring the replacement of rotten straw and the reinforcement of the pole frame. The peasant had to predict the weather and manage to repair the roof before the rainy season set in. Otherwise, his family could be left out in the open. Imagine the stress of knowing that there was no reliable protection above your head and that your safety depended on a fragile structure made of plant materials. In the modern world, we perceive a leaking roof as a serious emergency requiring immediate intervention by specialists. In a medieval hut, leaks were a normal part of life. People simply moved pots and bowls under the dripping water and continued with their business. Your psyche, attuned to comfort and predictability, would experience constant stress from this uncertainty. In the next chapter, we will look inside this space and understand how the absence of personal boundaries affected the psychology of its inhabitants. The entire dwelling consisted of a single room measuring approximately 4 by 5 meters. 5 to 10 people slept, ate, worked, and spent all their time here. The concept of personal space or privacy was non-existent. Imagine being locked in a small room the size of a modern storage closet with your entire family for the whole winter, with no way to go outside or be alone. Your modern understanding of comfort, based on separate rooms, personal belongings, and the ability to shut yourself off from the world, would be shattered by the harsh reality of collective existence. The space that you consider sufficient for one person for a few hours had to accommodate an entire family for months. 20 square meters for 10 people meant that each person had only 2 square meters of personal space, less than the area of a modern single bed. In this cramped space, there was nowhere to even lie down completely without touching someone else in the household, let alone move around freely. Your habits of personal space, developed by modern civilization, would be constantly violated by the simple physical impossibility of observing them. In winter, when going outside was practically impossible due to the cold and snow, this room became the only living space for all the inhabitants. Months of confined existence in such conditions tested the mental fortitude of even those who had been accustomed to communal living since childhood. For modern people who value personal freedom and independence, such crowding would be a source of constant stress and claustrophobia. Being constantly in the sight of all family members erased the boundaries of individuality. Emotions, conversations, ailments, everything became public knowledge. This formed a completely different type of personality, oriented towards collective existence rather than personal needs. Try to imagine that every emotion you feel, every phone conversation you have, every moment of fatigue or irritation instantly becomes known to everyone around you. Modern life is built on the ability to control who we show ourselves to and what we show them. We can lock ourselves in a room, put on headphones, or go somewhere else. In a medieval hut, such luxuries simply did not exist, and every change in mood was immediately reflected in the general atmosphere of the home. Your modern habits of emotional privacy, the ability to cry alone, think about problems by yourself, express anger without witnesses, would have been completely impossible. Every attempt to cope with stress or anxiety would automatically involve all family members in the process, turning personal problems into collective ones. Such transparency of emotional life required completely different skills of psychological adaptation. Illness and ailments also became a common concern. There was no opportunity to get over it in silence or hide one's poor health from those around them. Every cough, every moan, every sign of illness instantly became the subject of general attention and concern. For modern people, accustomed to coping with illness in the privacy of their own rooms, such publicity of ailments would be an additional source of discomfort. Such a life required a complete renunciation of private life as we know it today. There was no room of one's own, not even a corner where one could be alone. Every step and every word was part of the common life. The concept of privacy, so important to modern man, simply did not make sense in the conditions of a medieval isba. Imagine that you have no personal diary to hide, no opportunity to listen to music with headphones, and not even a chance to think your thoughts in silence. Every idea, every desire, every plan automatically became part of the family discussion, whether you wanted it to or not. Modern rituals of solitude, a hot bath in a closed bathroom, reading in the quiet of your bedroom, meditation, or simply the opportunity to be alone with yourself, were absolutely impossible. Your psyche, tuned to regular periods of solitude for recovery and reflection, would have been in a state of chronic overload from constant social interaction. Even sleep offered no respite, as you slept mixed in with other people on a shared bed. The lack of personal belongings and personal space meant that the concepts of mine and yours were blurred beyond recognition. Clothes, dishes, tools, everything was shared and used as needed by any member of the family. For modern people, whose identity is largely built on the possession of personal belongings and space, such depersonalization would be a serious challenge to self-awareness and psychological stability.
And to you too.
The center of this world was an open hearth located right in the middle of the room. It was a shallow depression in the earthen floor, lined with stones. The fire burned almost around the clock, being the only source of heat. There was no chimney, so all the smoke rose to the ceiling and slowly escaped through a small hole in the roof, or simply seeped through the straw. The room was constantly filled with acrid smoke that made your eyes water and your throat tickle. The walls and ceiling were covered with a thick layer of black soot. Keeping the fire going was a sacred duty on which the life of the whole family depended. Fuel, wood or peat, was harvested in the summer and used very sparingly. How did people manage without electric light in almost constant darkness? In the next chapter, you will learn how they lit their homes. There were no windows in the modern sense in a peasant's hut. They were replaced by tiny holes in the walls, which were plugged with bundles of straw, rags, or covered with a cow's bladder. These holes let in a minimum of light, but also let out precious heat. Imagine yourself in a room where, instead of the usual large windows with clear glass, there are only a few fist-sized holes covered with a cloudy film made from animal intestines. Your eyes, accustomed to the abundance of natural light in modern homes with panoramic windows, would be in a state of constant strain from the lack of lighting. What you perceive as a basic right to see the world outside your window and enjoy the daylight was a luxury here, one that had to be chosen between light and heat. The bull's bladder, which served as glass, was cloudy and only allowed blurred outlines of the outside world to pass through. You would not be able to see what was happening on the street, assess the weather, or simply admire the landscape. The ways in which modern people are accustomed to connecting with the outside world would be unavailable. Your psyche, accustomed to constant visual contact with the environment, would experience discomfort from this isolation and limited view. In winter, these openings were tightly sealed with whatever materials were at hand, turning the house into a kind of bunker with no connection to the outside world. Every ray of light meant a loss of heat, so you had to choose between being able to see and being able to stay warm. For modern people who cannot imagine a living space without natural lighting, such a choice would be a source of constant internal conflict between comfort and survival. For most of the day, the interior of the izba was in semi-darkness, even when it was light outside. At dusk, the room was plunged into almost complete darkness. The only sources of artificial light were the hearth itself and a torch. Your day, accustomed to the rhythm of electric lighting, when a single flick of the wrist can turn night into day, would be confronted with the harsh reality of dependence on natural light. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon in winter, it was already so dark in the hut that it was difficult to distinguish people's faces at arm's length. Imagine how your biological clock, tuned to a 16-hour daylight period, thanks to artificial lighting, would try to adapt to 6 to 7 hours of natural light. The absence of a switch that could be clicked to instantly light up a room meant that every light source required time, effort, and resources to create. Your subconscious would constantly reach for a non-existent switch, and your hand would automatically search for a table lamp or LED light. These simple automatic movements would remind you of the gap between modern comforts and medieval reality. The dim light in the house meant that many of your usual activities, reading, needlework, detailed handiwork, became virtually impossible for most of the day. Your brain, accustomed to constant visual stimulation and the ability to do anything regardless of the time of day, would find itself in a state of sensory deprivation. Boredom and apathy, unfamiliar to modern people with their gadgets and entertainment, would become constant companions on winter days. A torch was a thin, long splinter of wood that was fixed in a special holder, a torch holder. It burned quickly, smoked heavily, and gave off a dim, flickering light. Dozens of such torches were needed to light a room for an evening. Imagine that your usual LED lamp, which burns for thousands of hours, is replaced by a splinter that burns out completely in 15 to 20 minutes. Every evening, you would have to prepare and light 20-30 such splinters just to extend the day by a few hours. Your hands, accustomed to simply pressing a button, would be constantly busy maintaining the fire, replacing burnt splinters, and cleaning soot. The flickering light of the torch created dancing shadows on the walls, which could frighten a modern person accustomed to even electric lighting. Your eyes were constantly straining to adapt to the changing light, leading to rapid fatigue and headaches. What peasants perceived as normal evening light would be a source of constant discomfort and visual strain for you. Soot from the torches settled on all surfaces, covering the walls, ceiling, and all objects with a black coating. Your modern understanding of clean indoor air, based on the absence of smoke and fumes, would have clashed with a reality where every evening meant filling your lungs with the products of wood combustion. The smoke stung the eyes and throat, causing constant coughing and squinting, sensations that modern medicine would classify as harmful to health, but which were an inevitable part of obtaining light during the dark hours of the day. The winter diet of a medieval peasant was extremely monotonous and meager. The staple food was coarse rye or barley bread. It was heavy, dense, and often contained impurities. Imagine that your varied diet of dozens of different foods was reduced to 5 to 6 items for the entire winter. The bread you are used to buying soft and airy at the supermarket would be replaced by a loaf as dense as a brick, which would have to be chipped away with a knife rather than sliced. Your teeth, accustomed to soft-baked goods, would constantly encounter hard pieces of unground grain, sand, and even small stones that got into the flour during milling. The modern idea of bread as a light and pleasant product would be shattered by the reality of food that was heavy on the stomach and required long chewing. Each piece of such bread was much more filling than modern bread, but it was also much harder to digest, causing a feeling of heaviness in the stomach. Your digestive system, accustomed to refined foods, would experience serious stress from having to digest coarse fiber and poorly processed grain. Impurities in bread, chaff, sand, pieces of bark, and even sawdust were added not by accident, but to increase the volume of expensive flour. What the modern food industry would classify as defective or even hazardous to health was a normal part of the daily diet. Your modern expectations of food purity and quality would be constantly violated by the need to consume products that would not pass any sanitary inspection today. Protein-rich foods were rare. Meat, if available, was salted or dried and added to soups in very small quantities. Dried peas and beans were the main sources of protein. The meat you are used to, tender chicken, juicy beef, or pork, would have turned into tough, over-salted pieces that had to be soaked and cooked for a long time to make them edible. Imagine the disappointment of realizing that a piece of meat the size of a matchbox had to provide protein for an entire family for a week. The amount of protein you get from one serving in a restaurant would last a peasant family a month. A modern person accustomed to daily consumption of meat, fish, dairy products, and eggs would find themselves on a semi-starvation protein diet. Your body, which requires 60-80 grams of protein per day, would get at most 15 to 20 grams from dried peas and rare pieces of salted meat. Constant hunger and weakness would become your companions, as your body would not get enough building material to repair muscles and tissues. Peas and beans, which form the basis of the protein diet, required prolonged soaking and cooking, as they were as hard as pebbles when dried. These same foods caused increased gas formation, which created additional discomfort in the cramped quarters of the izba. Your modern digestive system, unaccustomed to large amounts of legumes, would experience constant problems with digestion and bloating. Vegetables were mainly sauerkraut, turnips, and onions, which were stored in the cellar. There were no fresh products at all. Your usual variety of vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, carrots, various greens, would be reduced to 3 types of vegetables preserved from the fall. Sauerkraut, stored in wooden barrels, was sour and soft, often covered with a white mold that was simply removed before consumption. Your modern ideas about the freshness and appearance of food would be constantly challenged by the need to eat what today would look spoiled. Turnips, which were the main root vegetable before the advent of potatoes, were tough, fibrous, and had a distinctive bitter taste. Imagine that this product, which modern people hardly ever eat, becomes one of the main sources of carbohydrates and vitamins in your diet. Onions, stored in braids under the ceiling of the izba, became limp by midwinter and began to sprout, but were still used to add flavor to bland food. The lack of fresh fruits and vegetables meant that your body suffered from an acute vitamin deficiency, especially vitamin C. Scurvy, a disease that modern medicine easily prevents with proper nutrition, was a constant threat. Your gums would bleed, your teeth would loosen, and your skin would bruise from the slightest bump. Symptoms that today would send you straight to the doctor, but back then were considered normal signs of winter. How did they dress to withstand the cold in such conditions? In the next chapter, we will look at their winter wardrobe. The clothing of a medieval peasant was functional and remained virtually unchanged over the years. The main materials were coarse wool and linen. A linen undershirt was worn directly on the body, and a woolen tunic was worn over it. Imagine that your wardrobe of dozens of items of clothing has been reduced to 3 outfits that are supposed to last you a lifetime. The underwear that you change daily would be replaced by a coarse linen shirt that you would only take off to wash once every few months or even less often. Your skin, accustomed to soft cotton and synthetic fabrics, would be constantly irritated by the prickly fibers of unbleached linen and coarse wool, causing itching and redness. The modern idea of clothing as a means of self-expression and following fashion would be shattered by the harsh reality of functionality. Every item of clothing served exclusively practical purposes to keep you warm and protect you from the wind, rather than for beauty or comfort. Your subconscious would constantly search for familiar details, zippers, elastic inserts, soft linings, that simply did not exist in medieval clothing. The lack of individual sizing meant that clothes either hung loosely or were too tight, as each item was sewn according to average patterns. Your modern expectation that clothing should flatter the figure and fit properly would clash with the reality of one-size-fits-all tunics and pants that were equally uncomfortable on everyone. The concept of my clothes was blurred, as items were often passed down or shared among family members. There were several layers of clothing, as the air between them helped to retain heat. Pants were also made of wool and tucked into wraps or simple leather shoes. Heavy wool cloaks served as outerwear. Your modern understanding of layering clothing as a fashion technique would become a necessity of life, where each layer was critical for survival. Imagine that instead of a light-down jacket, you have to wear 3 or 4 layers of heavy wool, which restrict your movement and make you feel like you are wearing armor. The total weight of a peasant's winter clothing was 8 to 10 kilograms, as if you were constantly carrying a heavy backpack. The lack of elastic materials and convenient fasteners turned simple dressing into a complex ritual that required time and often outside help. Your modern habit of quickly pulling on jeans and a t-shirt would be challenged by the reality of leg wraps that had to be carefully wound on and to stay in place all day. Every morning would begin with a half-hour procedure of putting on numerous layers of clothing. Shoes were simple leather bags on your feet that got wet, didn't keep you warm, and wore out quickly. Your feet, accustomed to high-tech sneakers with cushioning and moisture-resistant membranes, would constantly be cold, wet, and sore from the lack of foot support. The concept of comfortable footwear for different activities simply did not exist. The same leather shoes were used for working in the fields, walking around the house, and rare outings into society. These clothes were almost never washed, especially in winter. They were saturated with smoke, sweat, and the smells of the home. Cleanliness was an unaffordable luxury, giving way to the need to stay warm. Your modern habit of changing your underwear daily and washing your clothes regularly would have been met with the harsh reality that washing in winter was practically impossible due to the cold and lack of hot water. Imagine that your clothes had not been washed for months, absorbing all the smells and dirt of everyday life. What modern hygiene considers unacceptable was the only possible way to survive the cold season. Clothes became a second skin, saturated with human sweat, smoke from the hearth, and the smells of food and animals. Your modern sense of smell, sensitive to any deviation from cleanliness, constantly sent alarm signals from the smells of your own clothes. Each item of clothing carried the history of months of wear without washing, creating a unique but extremely unpleasant aroma for modern people. Wet clothes had to be dried directly on the body because taking them off meant being left without protection from the cold. Your skin, accustomed to dry and clean clothes, would be constantly irritated by damp, dirty fabrics. Itching, rashes, and other skin problems were inevitable companions of such a lifestyle, but they had to be endured for the sake of preserving vital warmth. Winter days were short, and all activity revolved around daylight hours and the fire in the hearth. At dawn, the few outdoor chores began. Weather permitting, water had to be fetched and fuel supplies checked. Imagine that your usual daily routine, stretched out over 16-18 hours thanks to electricity, has been reduced to 6 to 7 hours of active time. Your biological clock, tuned to the modern rhythm of life with artificially extended days, would experience a serious disruption from having to live according to the sun. The comfort of planning your activities for any time of day, which you have become accustomed to, would be shattered by the harsh reality of dependence on natural light. In the modern world, a morning trip to fetch water takes seconds. Turn on the tap, and the water flows. In medieval reality, this turned into a dangerous expedition to a frozen well or ice hole, where you had to chop ice, carry heavy buckets, and constantly make sure that the water did not freeze on the way home. Your hands, accustomed to warm tap water, would freeze after just a few minutes of contact with ice-cold water and metal buckets. Checking fuel supplies meant daily anxiety about whether there would be enough firewood until morning, whether it had gotten wet from the snow, or whether your neighbors had stolen it in desperation. Your modern attitude toward heating as a guaranteed service that you simply pay for would have been replaced by a daily struggle for every splinter of wood. Every log had to be earned, harvested, dried, and treasured like a precious gem because life literally depended on it. Most of the time was spent inside the hut in semi-darkness. Men repaired tools, wove baskets, or worked with wood. Women spun wool, wove, or mended clothes by the dim light of a torch. Your modern entertainment, television, the internet, social media, games, would disappear without a trace, leaving you alone with the simplest manual tasks. Imagine the psychological shock of realizing that the only entertainment available is repairing tools or weaving baskets in the semi-darkness. Your brain, accustomed to constant information stimulation, would find itself in a state of sensory deprivation, with the only impressions coming from the tactile sensations of working with your hands. The monotony of daily activities, the same movements, the same objects, the same environment, would be a real test for the modern psyche, which craves novelty and variety. Your hands, accustomed to keyboards and touchscreens, would have to learn to work delicately with wool, wood, and the simplest tools. Every movement would require concentration and skill, since damaged materials could not simply be thrown away and replaced with new ones. Working by torchlight meant constant eye strain and frequent mistakes due to poor lighting. Your modern eyes, accustomed to bright monitors and high-quality lighting, would quickly tire from trying to make out details in the flickering light of a splinter. Headaches and eye strain would become constant companions of any detailed work, forcing you to pause every few minutes to rest. With the onset of darkness, active activity came to a halt. The family gathered around the hearth, had dinner, and soon went to bed. Long winter evenings were a time for stories, legends, or simply silent anticipation of the morning. Your modern evening, filled with TV shows, movies, books, and chatting on messengers, would turn into endless hours of sitting in semi-darkness with people with whom you have already spent the whole day in a confined space. Imagine the psychological strain of having to entertain yourself exclusively by talking to the same people day after day, month after month. Your need for personal time and variety in communication would remain completely unsatisfied. Going to sleep at 7 to 8 p.m., dictated by the lack of light, would radically disrupt your usual biorhythms. Modern people, accustomed to going to bed after midnight, would find themselves in bed when their bodies are still full of energy and not ready for rest. Insomnia and anxiety would become constant companions in attempts to fall asleep at an unusually early hour. especially given the stress of radically changed living conditions. Silently waiting for morning in pitch darkness, interrupted only by the crackling of wood in the hearth, would be a real test for the psyche of modern people. Your brain, accustomed to constant stimulation and entertainment, would be left alone with its own thoughts and fears for 12 to 14 hours of winter night. The absence of the usual ways to distract yourself from anxious thoughts, music, reading, watching videos, would turn every night into a marathon of self-analysis and worry about tomorrow. The psychological pressure was enormous. The constant cold that penetrated to the bone, the dim light, the monotonous food, and the confined space were depressing. The lack of entertainment and news from the outside world created a feeling of isolation. Imagine that your modern stress-relieving mechanisms, a hot shower, your favorite music, a walk in the park, a phone call to a friend, have disappeared without a trace. Instead, you found yourself locked in a cold, dark space with the same people for months, with no opportunity to distract yourself or change your surroundings. Your psyche, accustomed to a variety of stimuli and the ability to control your environment, would be in a state of chronic tension due to complete helplessness in the face of circumstances. Modern psychology knows that isolation and monotony can lead to depression in just a few weeks. Medieval peasants endured these conditions for months without even a concept of mental health or ways to maintain it. Your brain, accustomed to a constant flow of information and impressions, would begin to seek stimuli where there are none, in your own fantasies and obsessive thoughts, which could lead to hallucinations and nervous breakdowns. The lack of news from the outside world meant complete information isolation, which for a modern person would be equivalent to sensory deprivation. Your need to know what is happening in the world, to receive updates and stay informed, would remain completely unsatisfied. This would create a constant feeling of anxiety and uncertainty, as you would not know what was happening even in the neighboring village, let alone the wider world. Survival required not only physical but also tremendous moral fortitude. People lived in a state of constant stress caused by the threat of hunger and cold. The ability to put up with discomfort and not fall into despair was a key skill. Your modern life is built on predictability and security. You know that tomorrow there will be food in the refrigerator, warmth in the house, and a roof over your head. In medieval reality, every day began with the question, will we live to see spring? Imagine the psychological pressure of knowing that your survival depends on the amount of firewood in the shed and the sacks of grain in the cellar, which are inexorably dwindling with each passing day. Modern people are used to solving problems through active measures, consulting specialists, buying what they need, finding information on the internet. In a medieval hut, most problems could not be solved. One could only endure and hope. Your psyche, tuned to finding solutions and controlling the situation, would experience frustration from complete helplessness in the face of cold, hunger, and disease. The lack of medical care meant that every illness and every injury could be fatal. Your modern peace of mind, based on the availability of doctors and medicines, would be replaced by constant anxiety about your health and that of your loved ones. Every cough, every pain would be perceived as a potential threat to life, creating chronic stress and hypochondria. Now let's return to our modern home. We control the temperature with a thermostat without thinking about where the heat comes from. Our walls with multi-layer insulation reliably protect us from any frost. After your imaginary stay in a medieval hut, your return to a modern apartment would be a real culture shock in reverse. Imagine how you would feel when a simple turn of the heating control instantly creates the perfect temperature of 22 degrees, without chopping wood, without lighting a fire, without the constant fear of running out of fuel. What seemed natural and self-evident to you would now be perceived as an incredible luxury and technological miracle. Your walls, which you never noticed before, would suddenly take on new meaning. They are not just partitions, but powerful fortresses made of multi-layer materials, capable of retaining heat even in 40-degree frost.
Yes, everything is...
No gaps, no drafts, no need to constantly monitor the condition of the walls. Just absolute protection that works for decades without your involvement. Every square meter of your home represents an engineering marvel that was inaccessible to entire civilizations of the past. The heating system, hidden in pipes and radiators, provides even heat throughout the house without a single source of open fire. You don't have to get up at night to stoke the fire, and you don't have to worry about the stove going out and freezing in your sleep. This invisible network of pipes, boilers, and automatic systems works like a well-coordinated organism, maintaining your comfort 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Surviving in those conditions meant having completely different skills and psychological fortitude. We have completed our immersion into the harsh reality of medieval winter. The contrast with modern comforts is enormous and forces us to take a fresh look at the things we take for granted. Heat, light, and food, which we perceive as a given, were the subject of daily struggle for our ancestors. Their survival depended not on technology, but on endurance, knowledge, and fortitude. This experience shows how much humans and their environment have changed over the last few centuries. What aspect of medieval winter do you think would be most difficult for modern humans? The physical cold or the psychological pressure? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel to continue our journey through time.